I heard my son say, in careful, practiced Spanish, that once I signed the papers, they'd put me in a nursing home and be done with me. He said it lightly, almost playfully, as if discussing the weather. They thought I didn't speak a single word of their secret little language. They thought I was sitting behind them at the restaurant, waiting like an obedient shadow. But I understood every syllable, and for a moment, it wasn't my heart that stopped. It was the floor under my feet. I stayed still, the way you do when a doctor gives you a diagnosis you didn't expect, when your mind keeps running, but your body refuses to move. The low hum of conversations around us blurred into something distant, like waves crashing far away. My son leaned closer to his wife, lowering his voice, but not enough. "Just get her to sign," he continued. "Después la metemos ahí y ya está. After that, we stick her there, and that's it." He even chuckled. My only child. I had come early for their dinner invitation, wanting to look presentable, wanting to believe the evening meant something. 66 is not old, not yet, but the body feels different, and I'd chosen my clothes carefully, smoothing the sleeves twice before leaving home. I remember how the mirror showed a woman who still stood straight, though her eyes had learned to lower themselves around her son. I never expected gratitude from him, but I didn't expect this. Clara brushed a crumb from the tablecloth and muttered, "She's too stubborn. You'll have to push her a bit." Her Spanish was clumsy, the kind you learn from apps and gossip shows, but clear enough. The house is worth good money, and she won't need it in a home. A home. I suppose people like them think old age is contagious, something they can catch if they let it get too close. I stood just behind a decorative column, close enough to smell their wine, far enough to pretend I hadn't heard. I kept my purse close to my body, as if they might take that too. For a moment, I thought I might faint. But no. Something colder, steadier took hold of me. I realized I wasn't frightened. Not truly. What I felt was a clean, sharp clarity, the kind you get only once in your life and too late for many. My son wasn't a monster. He was simply a man who had stopped seeing his mother as a person, and that, somehow, was worse. I stepped back slowly, letting the soft restaurant music swallow the last of their words. I knew I couldn't let them see my face. Not like this. Not with the sting in my throat and the tight trembling in my hands. They had planned their little evening so carefully. A meal, a signature, a quiet disposal. They didn't deserve the dignity of my reaction. I turned toward the exit, moving with small, deliberate steps, the way I did on winter mornings when the sidewalk was icy. I didn't let myself look at them again. The air outside was warm, unusually warm for spring, and smelled faintly of rain. I walked past the valet, past the blooming planters and the soft yellow lights, until the sound of clinking glasses was far behind me. Only then did I allow myself to breathe, slow, steady, almost calm. I had heard enough, more than enough, and though my knees trembled, my mind was already awakening, one thought forming after another, quiet and precise. They wanted me gone, but I was not done yet. I walked slowly toward the bus stop, though I knew I wouldn't take a bus. I just needed distance. A simple bench under a flickering streetlight felt safer than any table in that restaurant. My legs were trembling, but my mind had never been clearer. Isn't it funny how certain truths arrive? Not with drama, not with thunder, but quietly, like someone finally turning on a light in a dark room you've sat in for years. I sat down and folded my hands in my lap. They still smelled faintly of the lavender soap I used before leaving home. I remember washing my hands longer than necessary, thinking about how I wanted to look respectable tonight. It feels silly now, but I suppose even at 66, a woman wants her child to see her with some pride. I had even put on the pearl earrings Victor, my husband, bought me for our 10th anniversary. He's been gone 15 years, but I still reach for his voice when something inside me aches. He used to say I worried too much about Daniel. "He'll grow up, Maggie," he'd say. "He'll come back to you." And I believed him for decades. The truth is, I'd known something was wrong for a long time, not the kind of wrong you can point at directly. A quieter kind. Phone calls where Daniel's voice rushed through the conversation as if checking off a chore. Visits where he spent more time on his phone than looking at me. Clara's polite, tight smile that never reached her eyes. The way they talked about my house like it was a temporary arrangement, something waiting to be claimed. I told myself it was stress, work, marriage, life. People grow busy, I said. People grow distant. But I didn't expect them to grow cruel. Cars passed in slow intervals. The evening air thickened with the smell of approaching rain. I traced the edge of my coat, an old brown one with a loose button I had been meaning to fix. My breath came out steady, surprisingly steady, and I found myself thinking back to the moment Daniel invited me. He'd called 2 days earlier. "Mom, we haven't seen you properly in weeks. Let's have dinner. Just you, me, Clara." His voice had sounded softer than usual. I remember feeling such relief. I'd spent that entire morning choosing a dress that wasn't too dark or too cheerful. Nothing that said I was trying too hard. On the drive there, I caught myself hoping for a pleasant evening, just once. Maybe a real conversation. Maybe he'd ask about the new plants I'd put in the garden. Maybe he'd remember. I once had a life of my own, before I became his mother. I imagine that's what hurts most. Not the plan they made, not even the home they spoke of, but the years I spent softening the world for him, holding him when he cried, listening when no one else did, believing that somewhere beneath the roughness of adulthood was still the boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and stories about school. A bus rumbled past, its light sweeping over the pavement in a long, trembling arc. I realized then I couldn't sit outside forever, gathering pieces of myself under a streetlight. I needed to go home, my own home, the house they wanted me to sign away. I stood up slowly, steadying myself with both hands on the bench, the way older women do when they refuse to admit age has snuck up on them. As I walked toward the main road, I caught glimpses of the restaurant through the branches of the trees. Warm lights, white tablecloths, wine glasses glinting like little trapped stars. I imagined them sitting there now, waiting for me. Clara checking her watch. Daniel rehearsing his lines. Neither of them imagining that I'd heard everything already. The taxi driver who stopped for me didn't say much. A quiet man in his 70s, with silver hair and gentle eyes. I was grateful for the silence. The world felt fragile, like a porcelain dish you don't dare move. I stared out the window as the city passed by. Dim shops closing for the night. Couples walking under umbrellas. A teenager laughing loudly with someone on the phone. Ordinary scenes. And I felt a strange calm wash over me. Almost like grief, but not as heavy. More like the moment after grief, when something firm settles inside your ribs. When the taxi pulled up to my house, I paid and thanked him. My porch light was on, casting its soft glow across the steps. I had forgotten to turn it off before leaving. It felt like the house was welcoming me back, as if saying, "You're safe here. You're still yours." I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and quietly shut the world out. Only then, in the privacy of my dim living room, did the first tear slip down my cheek. just one. Not from weakness, but from the simple truth I could no longer avoid. My son didn't see me anymore, but I saw him, finally, completely. I didn't turn on the lights right away. The darkness felt kinder, almost protective, wrapping itself gently around me while my mind replayed the voices I had overheard. I stood in the hallway, holding onto the edge of the small table where I kept my keys, letting the familiar smell of home steady me. There was chamomile from the sachets in the drawer, lemon oil from the wood polish, the faintest trace of Victor's old aftershave that had seeped into the hall closet years ago. These things reminded me I had lived a real life, a whole one, not the fragile, diminishing version Daniel and Clara seemed to imagine. I walked into the kitchen and filled a glass of water. My hands were steady again. No trembling, no panic. That surprised me. I'd expected to be shaking with anger or grief or something loud and dramatic, but instead, everything inside me felt quiet, almost painfully clear. I sat down at the small table by the window, the same spot where I had once helped Daniel with his homework, where I'd written lists for groceries, where Victor and I used to drink coffee on slow Sunday mornings. I traced the edge of the table with my fingers, thinking of how ordinary life can be right up until it isn't. I could still hear their voices, the lazy confidence in them, the way people speak when they're convinced they hold the upper hand. Daniel had sounded so certain when he laid out the steps. First, she signs the transfer. She trusts me. She always signs. My son, talking about me as if I were a hesitant tenant instead of his mother, and Clara, with her quick little comments, the way she leaned in and said, "Just don't let her think too much. You know how older people get ideas." Ideas. As if I were an empty cabinet that occasionally rattled. I leaned back in the chair, letting the coldness settle under my skin. I wasn't angry at them for wanting the house. People get greedy. People rationalize. They convince themselves they deserve what they want. What hurt, what truly stung, was how comfortable they were plotting the rest of my life. How casually they spoke about putting me somewhere. No name, no thought of dignity, just a vague location to toss me into when I was no longer useful. It made me think of my mother years ago, how carefully she had planned her own later years so she wouldn't become a burden on anyone. She'd saved every penny, made lists, arranged her will, chose a small senior residence she liked. She'd done everything right, but even so, she worried. I remember telling her she didn't have to, because family takes care of one another. And I believed that then. I believed it with the full, foolish confidence of a woman who hadn't yet learned that love can soften, fade, and sometimes warp into something unrecognizable. Outside, a slow rain began tapping against the window, soft and rhythmic. I found myself listening to it, letting its steadiness fill the silence. The house felt heavier than usual, as if holding its breath with me. I thought of Daniel as a boy, bright-eyed, curious, affectionate. He used to crawl into my lap just to sit quietly while I read. I remember his small hand on my arm, how he used to say, "Don't stop, Mom. I like when you read." I don't know when that boy disappeared. Maybe he grew away slowly, a little each year, and I just didn't notice because I was always smoothing the road before him. At some point, I rose and walked into the living room. I turned on one small lamp, just enough to cast a soft glow across the old rug. My reflection appeared faintly in the dark window ahead of me. I looked tired, yes, but not defeated. There was still something firm in my posture, a bone-deep steadiness that age had not taken from me. I sat down in Victor's old armchair and let the silence settle. And then quietly, almost without realizing it, I began reconstructing their entire conversation in my mind, line by line, tone by tone. I wanted to remember every word, not out of vengeance, but because understanding was important. You cannot face a truth halfway. You either see it clearly or you pretend it away, and I wasn't going to pretend anymore. Once she signs, after that, we put her there. You have to push her. She won't need the house. It's the best time. She's getting older. Such small sentences, but they carried the weight of years. Years of me taking the softer path. Years of me giving them the benefit of the doubt. Years of believing that love, mother's love, could outlast disappointment. I folded my hands together and sat still for a long moment. The rain grew heavier, striking the glass in hurried little bursts. Somewhere inside me, something clicked into place with a finality I hadn't felt before. They thought they were planning my future, but they had no idea who I was. Not anymore. Tomorrow, I would begin planning theirs. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, and not from shock, but from a strange new alertness, as if something inside me had finally opened its eyes. I sat in the quiet living room until the rain stopped, listening to the soft ticking of the old wall clock. It was a familiar sound, steady and patient, one I'd grown so used to that I rarely noticed it. But that night, it felt different. Each second seemed to say, "You're still here. You're still yours. You have time left and you'll decide what to do with it." Around 2 a.m, I made a cup of mint tea, the mild, comforting kind I drink when sleep refuses to visit. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and walked to the window. The street was empty, washed clean by the rain, the pavement glistening like polished stone. I watched the reflections of streetlights ripple in small puddles. Everything looked quiet, almost honest. I wondered if silence has always been this revealing, or if age simply sharpens your ability to hear the truth. I replayed the moment I left the restaurant. I remembered the softness of the carpet under my feet, the faint music from the speakers, the smell of grilled fish and expensive wine drifting through the dining room. I remembered how warm the doorknob was when I pulled it open to leave. Small details, but they stayed with me. They anchored me. They proved I hadn't dreamed any of it. I had truly heard my son discuss my future like a business transaction. I had truly listened to his wife suggest where to place me when they were done. At some point, I sat down at the kitchen table and took out a small notepad I kept for grocery lists. I laid it in front of me, clicked a pen, and stared at the blank page. I wasn't planning revenge. Revenge is a young person's hunger, messy and impatient. I needed something quieter, something clean, something that wouldn't dirty my heart, even if theirs was already stained. I wrote a single line: steps I must take. My handwriting looked smaller than usual, uneven, but the words were clear enough. I let the pen rest on the page for a moment, gathering my breath. Then I wrote again, slower this time, as if each letter needed room to settle. Go to the bank. Call the attorney. Review documents. Think. Don't rush. I underlined that last one. I am 66. I have earned the right to move carefully, with dignity. They had rushed through their plans with the arrogance of people who believe their hands already hold the outcome. I wouldn't make that mistake. By the time dawn approached, a pale blue glow creeping along the horizon, I felt steadier. I put on a warm sweater and stepped outside onto the porch. Morning birds were starting to sing, those restless early creatures that seemed to know secrets the rest of us never learn. The air smelled fresh, damp, like new beginnings or long overdue endings. I sat down on the porch chair Victor used to fix every spring, tightening the screws with a seriousness that always made me smile. I rested my hands on my knees and breathed deeply. There was a quiet strength in the morning air. I felt it gathering inside me. Around 6, my phone buzzed for the first time, Daniel's name appearing on the screen. I let it ring. The house felt too peaceful to let his voice enter. A few minutes later, it buzzed again. Voicemail. Then another call. Then Clara. Then Daniel again. I turned the phone face down on the porch table. Not out of spite, but because I didn't belong to their panic anymore. They could talk to the silence for now. I thought of the years I had softened my voice for Daniel, all the ways I bent myself to avoid conflict, to keep peace, to be the understanding mother. But understanding has its limits. There is a line older women know well, one we rarely cross because our generation was taught to be grateful for what we have. But once that line is crossed, once that quiet insult is spoken aloud, something inside us hardens, not into bitterness, but into resolve. By 7, I went inside, washed my face, tied my hair back and chose simple clothes. Nothing fancy. Just myself, unadorned but steady. I looked in the mirror, expecting to see a wounded expression, perhaps something fragile. But what I saw startled me. My gaze was level, my jaw firm. I looked older, yes, but also unmistakably alive. I picked up the notepad again, read the short list. Then I slipped it into my purse. I locked the front door carefully, turning the key until it clicked into place with a sound that felt final and right. I stepped out into the morning, the sun rising behind me, stretching long shadows across the street. And as I walked toward the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A sense of choice. A sense of my own beginning. The house greeted me with its usual stillness when I returned after my errands, the kind of silence that has shape and memory. I walked through the hallway slowly, passing each photograph as if they were small checkpoints of my life. Victor, with his gentle smile. Daniel at 5 with a missing front tooth. The 3 of us at the beach. My hair blowing wildly, Victor laughing, Daniel clutching a bright red bucket. Photographs freeze love in a way life never can. They hold the best moments, not the truth that follows. I took off my coat and draped it over the back of the armchair. My body felt tired, but not from age, from awareness, from the weight of everything I had accepted for years. I sat down and let my eyes wander across the room, to the shelves Victor built, to the plants I kept alive mostly out of stubbornness. This house had held us through storms, celebrations, heartbreaks. And now it held me alone. But it was still mine. The afternoon sunlight fell across the carpet, soft and warm. I could almost see Victor sitting across from me, pretending to read while actually watching me think. "You furrow your brow too much," he used to say. Life isn't a puzzle to solve. I wish he were here now. Not to protect me, no, I can do that myself, but to steady the part of me that still wants to believe the best of our son. Grief doesn't disappear with years. It just becomes quieter, like a river under ice. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back. My thoughts drifted to Daniel, not the man he is now, but the boy he was then. He used to bring me wildflowers he pulled from neighbors' lawns, crushed and uneven, but offered with such pride. He used to slip notes under my bedroom door. "Mom, sorry I yelled. Mom, I love you. Mom, don't be mad at me." I kept every one of them for years, tucked in a little box that still sits in the closet. Sometimes I wonder if he even remembers writing them. What happened to him? People say children learn love from how they're raised, but adulthood reshapes them in ways we can't predict. He grew older, busier, sharper. He met Clara, a woman who always looked at me as though motherhood were a profession I'd long retired from. At first, she was polite enough, but marriage magnifies people. In her case, it magnified entitlement. And Daniel followed along, as if her opinions were more real than the years I held his hand. My phone buzzed again from the kitchen counter. I didn't move. It could ring itself hoarse. I wouldn't answer. They weren't calling to apologize. They were calling because something had slipped out of their control. And that something was me. Eventually, I stood and went to the small cabinet where I kept important documents. I pulled out the papers Victor and I had organized over the years, insurance forms, the deed to the house, medical directives. I sat at the table and spread them out, one by one, the way you lay out puzzle pieces before choosing which ones still matter. There was the deed, with both our names on it. His handwriting on the original signature line was bold and steady. Mine was thinner, more careful. I touched his name lightly with my fingertips. The house was never meant to be a bargaining chip. It was the nest we built together. And now it was the target Daniel and Clara felt entitled to. I stacked the documents into neat piles. Some would need reviewing, others replacing. I'd already taken the first step by removing Daniel's access. But this was about more than banks and papers. This was about reclaiming ownership of myself, the part they assumed would always be pliable. The clock chimed softly from the living room, afternoon slipping toward evening. I made myself a cup of tea and stood at the window. The garden looked a little wild, some weeds creeping through the flower beds, the rosemary bush growing sideways. I should tend to it, I thought, but not today. There was something almost comforting in its messiness, as if it were allowed to grow without explanation. When I took my first sip of tea, something inside me settled. A decision, still forming but unmistakable. I wouldn't confront Daniel yet. Not with anger, not with accusations. That would only turn me into the villain in a story they'd already rehearsed. I was not going to fight on their terms. I would move slowly, quietly, the way time itself moves. I would say little. I would change what needed changing. And when the truth finally reached them, in the form of locked accounts and revised documents, they would understand that the woman they tried to dismiss was still very much alive and capable. I finished my tea and placed the cup in the sink. Outside, the first stars appeared, shy and distant. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the house breathe around me, feeling something new rise inside me. It wasn't anger, not even sadness. It was a kind of strength I thought I'd lost years ago. The phone began ringing again just as I was rinsing my teacup. I let the sound echo through the quiet kitchen, a long, sharp vibration that felt strangely disconnected from me. Once, a call from Daniel would have sent me hurrying, wiping my hands, softening my voice before answering. Now the sound felt like a neighbor's television. Background noise, irrelevant to the room I occupied. I dried the cup slowly, set it upside down on the rack, and wiped my hands on a dish towel. Only when the ringing stopped did I glance at the phone. 7 missed calls. 3 from Daniel, 2 from Clara, 2 from an unknown number I suspected was hers using someone else's phone. It amazed me how quickly panic can make people resourceful. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about whatever story they had planned crumbling before it began. I turned the phone face down again and walked into the living room. The house was dim, holding the kind of silence that feels old and knowing. I sat in Victor's armchair, sinking into the familiar cushion. A long sigh escaped me, less a sound than a release. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding myself since the restaurant. Now, in the stillness, Memories came in soft waves. I remembered Daniel at 13, lanky and shy, knocking on our bedroom door late one evening after a fight with a friend. He sat on our bed, knees pulled to his chest, voice trembling as he told us what happened. Victor listened with that patient half-smile of his, and when Daniel finished, he squeezed our son's shoulder and said, "You don't win friends by holding power over them. You win them by being decent." Daniel nodded solemnly, as if absorbing a lesson he would never forget. But life has a way of sanding down even the best teachings. Somewhere along the way, decency had become negotiable for him. The phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail. I ignored it. Something inside me resisted the idea of hearing his voice too soon. I wasn't prepared for the excuses, the half-truths, the tone he used when he needed something. I knew that tone well. It always began gently, then frayed into frustration, then hardened into blame. Tonight, I wouldn't give him the stage to perform on. Instead, I reached for the small wooden box on the side table, the one where I kept photographs and old letters. I opened it carefully. Inside were pieces of a different life. Birthday cards Daniel made in school, Victor's notes from our grocery runs, tiny mementos only sentimental people keep. I lifted a folded paper with Daniel's childish handwriting. "Mom, sorry I broke your cup. I'll be better." I smiled, a tired kind of smile. Children always promise to be better before they know what it means. I placed the note back in the box and sat quietly for a long moment. The past and present lay together in uncomfortable contrast, like two photographs taken in the same room years apart. I couldn't force them to match. Another voicemail, then another. Eventually, curiosity tugged at me, gentle but insistent. I picked up the phone and held it loosely, as if it might burn if I gripped it too hard. I didn't press play. I simply stared at Daniel's name, the little icon showing he had tried again and again. It struck me how desperate people became when their plans didn't unfold the way they expected. He wasn't calling out of affection. He was calling because he felt me slipping out of his grasp. I set the phone down without listening. If I allowed his voice into my home now, I would wobble. Not because I believed him, but because mothers are wired to hope. Even at 66, with clarity hard-won and overdue, a mother's heart still wants to give her child one more chance. I couldn't afford that. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. The house was growing dark, but I didn't reach for the lights. Instead, I let the dusk gather in the corners, softening edges, calming me. I leaned back and listened to the familiar creaks in the floorboards, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the old structure settling around me like comforting arms. This was the only place left where I didn't feel invisible. I must have sat there an hour before standing again. My knees protested slightly, a reminder that time has been walking beside me whether I welcomed it or not. I stretched, then walked to the small desk near the hallway. I pulled out a sheet of paper and began writing a list, not of chores, not of errands, but of moments from the past few years. Times when Daniel or Clara dismissed me, overlooked me, used me. I wasn't collecting grievances. I was collecting proof. Not for them, for myself. Proof that what happened in the restaurant wasn't an accident, but the result of a long decline, a gradual erasing. People think cruelty appears suddenly. It doesn't. It grows in the empty spaces left when respect fades. When I finished writing, I folded the paper and tucked it into my purse. It wasn't anger I felt. It was recognition, sharp, steady, almost peaceful. The phone buzzed once more. I let it vibrate until it stopped, a little quieter each second. Tomorrow, I told myself, the true work begins. Tonight, I rest. Because even women like me, quiet women, patient women, need strength for what comes next. Morning arrived quietly, the way gentle truths do, without ceremony. I woke before the alarm, the faint gray of dawn seeping through the curtains. My body felt tired but determined, as if every bone already knew what needed to be done. I dressed simply, brushed my hair back, and stood for a moment in front of the mirror. I didn't look angry. I didn't even look sad. I looked like a woman who had finally stopped pretending not to see. The bank opened at 9, but I left the house early, wanting time to gather myself. The air was cool enough that I pulled my sweater tighter around my shoulders. My purse felt heavier than usual with the documents inside, but that weight steadied me. The street was quiet, only a few cars passing, the world beginning its day without knowing that mine was about to shift. At the bank, the young man at the reception desk greeted me with a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" His voice was kind but formal, the sort of tone people use with older women, assuming fragility. I met his gaze steadily. "I need to speak with a financial officer," I said. "It's important." He nodded and led me to a waiting area. The chairs were cold, the floor polished to a shine that caught the light like water. My hands rested on my purse, fingers lightly touching the flap, as if keeping the truth inside from spilling out too soon. A woman in her 40s approached me. Calm eyes, firm handshake. "Mrs. Hayes, please come with me." Her office smelled faintly of citrus and paper. I sat across from her, placing my documents gently on the desk. "How can I assist you today?" Her tone was warm, but I still felt that tiny hesitation people carry when they're afraid an elderly person will ramble or lose her point. I didn't ramble. "I need to revoke all existing account authorizations. All access granted to my son," I said clearly, "and I want to remove him from any automatic transfers." She blinked once, maybe surprised by how sharp my voice was, then nodded. "Of course, we can do that for you." I watched her type, her fingers moving briskly over the keyboard. She asked for confirmations and I gave them. She asked if I was certain about the changes and I said, "Yes, completely." She didn't pry. I appreciated that. When she pulled up the list of authorizations, I saw Daniel's name beside permissions I had forgotten I'd granted, small ones, large ones, ones meant to make things easier. Age teaches you that every convenience carries a price. She highlighted them one by one, then looked at me. "Shall I remove all?" "All," I repeated. Her mouse clicked, quiet but final, like a door gently closing. Next came the transfers. Monthly, quarterly. Some I recognized. Others I didn't. They had grown like weeds while I wasn't looking. She paused over one particularly large automatic payment. "Shall I cancel this one as well?" "Yes." Another click. For a moment, I imagined Daniel discovering the changes. His confusion first, then the edge of frustration, then the anger he always hid behind politeness when he wanted something. But that was no longer my problem to soften. When all the changes were complete, the woman printed a confirmation packet for me. The papers were warm from the machine when she handed them over. I tucked them into my purse carefully, like placing stones in a foundation. "Is there anything else you need today?" she asked. I hesitated, just for a breath. "I need to ensure my accounts are safe. Only in my name, no exceptions." She nodded. "They are now." Those words, simple as they were, settled something inside me. Safety isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a decision. I thanked her, left the office, and stepped back into the morning sun. The light felt different on my skin, warmer, steadier. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the cool air, feeling a quiet pulse of strength beneath my ribs. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the first true step toward my own freedom. After leaving the bank, I didn't go straight home. My steps turned almost on their own toward the small law office 2 blocks down, the one with the brick facade and the maroon awning I'd passed 100 times, but rarely entered. I had been here once years ago with Victor, finalizing something simple. It felt different now. Back then, the future still seemed wide and safe. Today, it felt more like a narrow hallway, quiet, dim, but mine to walk. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old books and lemon oil. A receptionist with soft gray hair looked up and offered a gentle smile. "Good morning. How can we help you?" "I need to speak with an attorney," I said. "It's regarding my will and some changes to personal documents." She nodded as though she understood more than I'd said. Older women have a way of recognizing each other's quiet emergencies. She led me to a small waiting area, but before I even sat down, a door opened and a man stepped out. Mid-50s, glasses low on his nose, tie a bit crooked in a way that suggested he adjusted it without caring if it was perfect. "Mrs. Hayes?" he asked. "I'm Attorney Sullivan." "Please come in." His office had the comfortable clutter of a man who did honest work. Papers stacked neatly, not meticulously. Books arranged by usefulness, not beauty. I sat down, setting my purse on my lap like a shield. "How can I assist you today?" he asked, folding his hands. I took a breath, long, steady. "I need to revise my will, substantially, and I need information on establishing a trust. Something secure, something no one can tamper with." His brows rose subtly, but he didn't ask why. "Good attorneys don't pry unless you want them to." "All right," he said. "Let's start with the will. What changes?" I hesitated only a moment. "My son is to be removed from it." He didn't flinch. Perhaps he'd heard this before. Parents betrayed, children grown careless. He simply nodded and wrote something on a yellow legal pad. "And the trust? Whom would it benefit?" That part came easier. "My granddaughter," I said. "Emily. She's the only one I trust, the only one who visits because she cares." Sullivan's expression softened. "A revocable or irrevocable trust." "Irrevocable," I said without wavering. "It must be ironclad." He nodded with approval. "That will protect your assets entirely. Once established, they cannot be claimed by anyone else." Anyone else. That was the phrase I needed. He explained the process. Paperwork, notarization, transfer of properties and accounts. I followed every word. Age may slow the body, but it sharpens the mind when life demands it. When he asked for the reasons behind the urgency, I simply said, "My son has made some plans for my future without my consent." A shadow crossed his face, the kind that comes from witnessing too many ordinary tragedies. "I see," he said quietly. "Then yes, this is the right course." He collected the necessary forms, sliding each one toward me. I signed with a steadiness that surprised even me. My signature looked different now, firmer, less forgiving. As he organized the documents, he said, "This will give you full control, Mrs. Hayes. Your son will have no legal access to your home, accounts, or personal affairs." Control. I hadn't realized how much I'd surrendered over the years, piece by quiet piece, like handing over stones from a wall until nothing stood between me and the world. When everything was complete, Sullivan stood and walked me to the door. "If you need anything else, call me. And please, take care of yourself." His voice wasn't professional then. It was human. I appreciated that more than I expected. Outside, the day had warmed, sunlight pooling on the sidewalk like gold. I stood in it for a moment, letting it touch my face. My purse felt heavier now with the new documents, the future tucked carefully inside. On the walk home, I passed a small cafe where people sat with their laptops and tall cups of coffee. I used to stop here with Daniel when he was young. Hot chocolate for him, tea for me. He would press his cold hands against mine, laughing as if he could melt winter. I paused by the window now, watching strangers chatter and stir sugar into their drinks, and felt a pang of something, not regret, not grief. Something lighter, though it hurt all the same. Back home, I placed the documents on the dining table, smoothing the edges with my palm. Each piece of paper felt like a brick in a new foundation, a way of saying, quietly but firmly, I decide my life. My phone buzzed in the other room. Daniel again, persistent, nervous. I didn't move to answer. Let him wait. Let him wonder. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't drifting through decisions. I was making them. I was pouring myself a glass of water when I heard the soft jingle of the front gate. It was a familiar sound, hesitant, careful, almost polite. Only one person entered my yard that way. A moment later, a gentle knock came at the door. 3 taps. Not loud, not demanding, just enough to say, "It's me. If you're resting, I can come back." I opened the door, and there she was, Emily, my granddaughter. 22, bright-eyed, soft-spoken, carrying her books in her arms like she always did. She smiled as soon as she saw me, that warm, unguarded smile that belonged to no one else in the family. "Hi, Grandma," she said, stepping inside. "I was in the area and wanted to check on you." In the area. Of course. She always said that, even when she drove across half the city. I hugged her gently, feeling that familiar flutter in my chest, the kind only kindness brings. She smelled faintly of vanilla lotion and cold air, a child's scent, though she wasn't a child anymore. "I'm glad you came," I told her, and I meant it more than she knew. She followed me into the kitchen, set her books on the table, and started helping herself to a glass. That was Emily, comfortable, considerate, without asking. She never rummaged, never assumed. She just waited for my nod, then moved with natural grace. "You didn't answer my text last night," she said softly, watching my face. "I wasn't sure if you were okay." "I was fine," I replied. "Just thinking." She tilted her head. She had Victor's way of doing that, waiting, not pushing. "Does it have to do with my dad?" He seemed tense this morning. Tense. The word sat between us like a stone. Emily didn't say upset or confused or even angry. Tense. She had a way of choosing the gentlest possible term, as if she feared she might bruise someone's feelings simply by naming the truth too bluntly. I took a sip of water and sat across from her. "Did he say anything?" Her eyes flickered downward. "Not really. Just that he needed to speak with you and you weren't picking up." She hesitated. He looked worried. Not mad. More like he was scrambling for something. Scrambling. Yes, that sounded right. I didn't want to pull Emily into this. She didn't deserve the weight of someone else's schemes. And I certainly wasn't going to repeat the words I heard in the restaurant. Those weren't words meant for young hearts, even strong ones. But I also wasn't going to lie. I have spent too many years softening the truth until it became unrecognizable. Your father and I had a misunderstanding, I said quietly. One that made me reconsider some things. Emily's brows knit together, concern settling on her face like a soft shadow. Are you hurt? She asked gently. Not physically, I mean. No, sweetheart. Not physically. She reached for my hand the way she used to as a little girl. Small, warm fingers curling around mine. I felt my throat tighten. Emily had always been gentle, but her gentleness had never been weakness. It was deliberate, like someone who understood pain early and decided never to pass it on. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. For a moment I wanted to. The urge rose sharply, a deep desire to tell someone, to lay down the burden and let another pair of hands hold it for a while. But I couldn't. I wouldn't make her choose sides. That wasn't her place. "Not yet," I said softly. "But I will, when the time is right." She nodded without protest. She trusted me. That alone made my chest ache. We talked for a while after that, about her classes, her internship, the stray cat she'd been feeding outside her apartment. She made me laugh when I didn't think I could, and then, as she reached for her books, she paused. "Oh." She pulled a small bag from her backpack. "I brought you these. Lemon cookies from the bakery near campus. I know they're your favorite." I stared at the simple little bag in her hands. No celebration. No occasion. Just a granddaughter thinking of her grandmother on an ordinary day. The kind of gesture that doesn't make noise but leaves marks anyway. Good ones. "Thank you," I whispered. "You're very thoughtful." She shrugged, smiling. "You've always been thoughtful to me." When she left, she hugged me tightly, holding on longer than usual. Maybe she sensed something shifting in the air. Maybe she always had been more perceptive than the rest of them. Or maybe she simply loved me. After the door closed, I stood at the window watching her walk down the path. Her steps were light, unburdened. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She trusted I was still standing there. And I was. When her figure disappeared around the corner, I turned back into the quiet house. Her presence lingered like warmth on my skin, a reminder of something I still had, something worth protecting. If Daniel believed he could discard me like an old coat, he didn't understand one thing. A woman is never weaker when she stands alone, only clearer, only freer. And after seeing Emily, I knew with absolute certainty whom my future belonged to. The house grew silent again after Emily left, but it wasn't the same kind of silence I'd been sitting with for days. Her presence lingered, warm, steady, like a hand still resting on my shoulder. I stood in the living room for a moment, letting that warmth settle inside me. It softened the sharpness of everything else, but it didn't erase it. Nothing could. I was heading toward the kitchen to make tea when the phone vibrated on the counter, loud, insistent. Daniel again. I stared at the screen, watched his name pulse like some warning light. For a second, I considered turning the phone off altogether, but something stopped me. A small, strange curiosity. I wanted to hear the tone he was using now. Not the words, those I could predict, but the tone. The call stopped. Then immediately came another, then another. I let them ring out. After the fourth one, a message appeared. "Mom, please answer. It's important." I didn't. Instead, I made my tea. Honey, a slice of lemon, the simple comforts of my age. I sat at the table, cupping the steaming mug, the warmth seeping into my palm like a quiet reminder that my life still belonged to me. Then, just as I lifted the cup, the phone rang again, sharper this time, as if the device itself were growing impatient. A sigh left my lips before I could stop it. Not fear, not dread, just tiredness. I picked up the phone and held it in my hand. I didn't want to answer, but I also knew avoidance has a way of giving people the illusion that they still have power. So I pressed accept and brought the phone to my ear, but I said nothing. "Mom?" Daniel's voice rushed out, too fast, too bright. "Mom, finally. I've been trying to reach you all morning." I stayed quiet. Not to punish him, to let him feel what silence really means. "Are you okay?" he asked, but the question was brittle, not concern, assessment. You didn't show up last night. Clara was worried. I almost laughed. Worried. Yes, I'm sure she was. Worried about signatures, documents, schedules. Not me. I'm fine, I said finally. My voice was calm, level, even. It startled him. I could hear it in the tiny pause before he spoke again. Well, good. Good. He cleared his throat. Listen, about last night. There seems to be some misunderstanding. Maybe we got the time wrong. Maybe. I was there, I said quietly. Another pause. A longer one. You were? His voice wavered a little. Why didn't you come in? Because I heard you. Because I heard every word, but I didn't say that. Not yet. I didn't feel it was necessary, I replied. He exhaled sharply, frustrated. Mom, you can't do that. You can't just disappear. We were expecting— No, I interrupted gently. You weren't. He froze. I heard it in the silence, stretching down the line, the moment when someone realizes the foundation of their lie is cracking. I don't understand what you mean, he said finally. I almost admired that, his ability to pretend confusion when the truth sat between us like an open suitcase with all the contents spilling out. You don't need to, I said. Not right now. He breathed in sharply, the sound tight with irritation. Look, if this is about the house— There it was, the word that always slipped out when he stopped performing. The house is fine, I said. It's safe. Another pause. He heard that word, safe, and it rattled him. What does that mean? He asked. It means you don't need to worry about it anymore. Mom, he said in that tone he used when he thought he could steer me with a softer voice. I'm just trying to help. You're trying to help yourself, I answered, still calm. I know the difference. That stunned silence again, like he had stepped into a room he thought was empty and found me standing there with the light on. His voice came back, sharper this time. Did someone put ideas in your head? Emily? Did she say something? Leave her out of this, I said, and my voice lifted. Not loud, but with a firmness that surprised even me. He huffed, irritated. Mom, you're acting strange. This isn't like you. No, I said softly. This is exactly like me, when I've stopped ignoring what I see. He didn't know how to answer that. I could feel him groping for footing, reaching for the familiar tools, guilt, worry, exasperation. But none of them worked tonight. Finally, he said, We need to talk, in person. I'm not ready, I replied. Mom? I ended the call, not abruptly, not angrily, just firmly. A period at the end of a sentence. I set the phone down and wrapped my hands around my tea again. The warmth returned to my palms, steady and grounding. My son had always believed he could shape me with his voice. Tonight, he learned silence can shape a person too. The quiet after I ended the call was almost soothing. I stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, letting my pulse settle. But I knew Daniel wouldn't be the only one reaching out. Clara had a different way of handling panic. Sharper, faster, more precise. If Daniel used guilt like a net, she used pressure like a blade. It didn't take long. The phone rang again, this time with her name on the screen. I didn't pick up. I placed the phone on the counter and let it buzz against the wood. A small, nervous sound. It rang a second time, then a third. By the fourth, silence fell. I almost believed she'd given up. Then came the voicemail. I pressed play, leaning back against the counter. Margaret, she began. Never Mom, never Mother, always Margaret, as if keeping me at arm's length were some quiet triumph. Her voice was smooth, too controlled. I'm trying to understand what's happening. Daniel is upset. You're not answering. And we really need to clear up some confusion. Confusion, a careful word, a word people use when they want to soften intentions that were never soft. She continued, her tone tightening. It's not reasonable to shut us out like this. We're your family. Whatever is going on, we should be talking about it directly. You were supposed to be at dinner. We were going to discuss some things that matter to all of us. I closed my eyes. Discuss some things. Yes. I remembered her leaning toward Daniel, whispering in Spanish that he just needed to push me. The memory settled like a stone in my stomach. Clara's voice shifted then, lighter, sweeter, the way people talk when they're sure they're the cleverest one in the room. If you're confused about the paperwork, Daniel can explain everything. He's only trying to help. You know that, right? I opened my eyes, staring at the small pattern of scratches near the sink. That tone, condescending wrapped in concern, was always harder to swallow than outright cruelty, because it asked me to doubt myself, to shrink, to be grateful for the hand pressing on my shoulder. The voicemail ended with a final attempt at softness. Please call us back. It's important. I didn't. I stood there a while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere down the street. Age gives you an odd gift. You learn to hear not just words, but the shape of the silence behind them. Clara's silence wasn't worry. It was frustration, a tightening coil of losing control. I poured myself another glass of water, letting the coolness settle the heat rising in me. Not anger, a boundary that had taken 66 years to grow. The phone rang again. No voicemail this time, just ringing, insistent, demanding. I let it go. When it finally stopped, relief spread through me like warm light. Then came the text. We're coming over. This is ridiculous. Of course they were. I placed the phone down gently, almost tenderly. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel dread. Just a quiet understanding of what was coming. That moment every woman eventually faces when she must stop being polite and start being clear. I walked into the living room and sat down in Victor's chair. The house was dim, except for a soft glow from the lamp. My hands folded naturally in my lap, the way my mother used to sit when she knew a hard conversation was coming. Outside, the gravel on the driveway shifted. A car door shut. Two voices murmured, one sharp, one heavy. Footsteps approached. Then came the knock. Hard. Too loud for a house this old. I inhaled slowly, letting the breath anchor me. They were impatient, angry, ready to reshape the story in their favor. But they were too late. I rose and walked toward the door, not hurried, not afraid, just steady, the way a woman walks when she's finally remembered her worth. My hand closed around the doorknob. Whatever waited on the other side, I wasn't the same woman they had planned to corner. They would speak. I would listen. But this time, I would not bend. I opened the door before they had the chance to knock again. Daniel stood on the porch, shoulders tense, eyes flicking over me as if searching for signs of weakness. Behind him, Clara hovered with her arms folded, her expression carefully arranged into something polite but brittle. The air between us felt thick, like a room where someone had just slammed a drawer but pretended nothing happened. "Mom," Daniel said too quickly, "we need to talk." I stepped aside, motioning them in. "Then come in." He hesitated, just for a breath, as if the balance of power had shifted in a way he hadn't expected. Clara brushed past him and entered first. She always did prefer being ahead. Inside, the house was dim and still. I didn't turn on the brighter lights. They didn't deserve the comfort of pretending this was an ordinary visit. Daniel looked around, uneasy, as though the quiet itself was accusing him. "Please sit," I said. We gathered in the living room. Daniel perched on the edge of the couch, leaning forward, hands clasped as if preparing a speech. Clara sat beside him, stiff-backed, her lips tight. I took Victor's armchair, not by strategy, by instinct. Daniel started first. Mom, you've been ignoring our calls, and the bank notified me that my access— Yes, I said calmly. I removed it. His brows jerked upward. But why? I thought we agreed I'd help manage things for you. I don't need that anymore. He blinked at me, confusion breaking through his practiced composure. Did someone tell you something? Did Emily— No, I cut in. This decision is mine. Clara leaned forward slightly. Margaret, we're just concerned. You've been acting unpredictable. And the changes you're making, they don't make sense. They make sense to me, I said. Silence stretched across the room, a taut string waiting to snap. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Look, if this is about last night— It is. He froze. Clara stiffened beside him, her eyes sharpening. Daniel swallowed. So, you heard we were at the restaurant? I did. And you were upset that we didn't wait longer? No, I said. I was upset because I heard what you said. The words hung there, simple, deliberate, heavy. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Clara quickly, as if hoping she'd speak first. She didn't. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture did. A tightening, a flicker of calculation. Mom, Daniel said softly, choosing his words with painful care. I think you misunderstood. I didn't. The quiet that followed felt like a wall dropping between us. Clara exhaled sharply and crossed her legs. Look, she said, her voice crisp. We were discussing long-term planning. Everyone our age talks about their parents' care. It's normal. You're alone in a big house. Daniel worries about you. Does he? I asked. Is that why he planned to push me a bit to sign papers? Her cheeks flushed, just slightly. Maybe you misheard. Maybe— I shook my head. I speak Spanish. They both went still, completely still. Daniel's face drained of color. Clara's eyes widened, then narrowed with a quick, involuntary flicker. Anger, embarrassment, fear, all trying to hide behind one another. You speak Spanish? Daniel whispered. Yes, I said. I learned quietly, for years. I didn't tell anyone. Daniel stared at the floor, stunned into silence. Clara recovered first. Well, she said coldly, if you heard it, then you know we were talking hypothetically. We weren't seriously— You meant every word, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You talked about me like I was a problem to arrange, a responsibility to offload, a house to take, a life to reorganize. Daniel put his face in his hands. Mom, please, it wasn't like that. You're taking it the wrong way. No, I said softly. For the first time in a long while, I'm taking it the right way. Tears gathered in his eyes. Not grief, not remorse. Panic. Clara reached for his arm but didn't look at me. You're overreacting, she said. Plenty of families— I'm not part of plenty of families, I answered. I'm part of this one. And this one has forgotten how to treat me with dignity. Daniel finally looked up. So what now? You cut me off? You change everything? After one misunderstanding? It wasn't one, I said. It was years. Years of being pushed aside. Doubted. Used. He shook his head, helpless. I don't know what you want me to say. Nothing, I replied. I'm not asking for apologies or explanations. I'm telling you that things won't be as they were. He opened his mouth again, but the words wouldn't come. Across the room, Clara spoke quietly, almost a whisper. You've made up your mind, then. I have. The room felt unbearably still. the truth settling into every corner like dust you can finally see in the light. Daniel stood abruptly, unable to sit anymore. "Mom, I need time." "I've had plenty," I said. He nodded once, brokenly, then looked at Clara. She rose too, her face a tight mask of anger she didn't voice. They walked to the door in heavy silence. Before leaving, Daniel paused. I didn't mean to hurt you." I nodded. "And yet you did." He looked down, defeated, and stepped outside. I closed the door quietly behind them, feeling the weight of the moment settle into my bones. Not painful, not triumphant, but necessary. For the first time in decades, I wasn't the one bending. After they left, the house settled into a silence so deep it felt almost physical, like a blanket laid gently over everything. I stayed by the door for a long time, my hand resting on the wood, feeling the echo of their presence leave the space inch by inch. There was no relief, not yet. Just a steady release, like loosening a knot that had been pulled tight for years. I walked back to the living room and sat in Victor's chair, letting my spine sink into the familiar shape it held. The air still carried a trace of Daniel's cologne, sharp, expensive, a scent that never suited him. I breathed it out slowly, letting it fade. What remained was my home, my air, my quiet. A few minutes passed before the phone buzzed again. I didn't need to look to know it was Daniel. He never let things sit. He filled silence the way some men fill empty rooms, with noise and explanations he hoped would reshape the truth. I didn't pick up. I let it ring until it stopped. Then another buzz, this time a message. "Mom, please. We need to fix this. Fix this." As if the problem were a broken light bulb, as if the truth could be patched over with a few softer words spoken after the damage was already done. I set the phone aside. It buzzed again moments later, his desperation bleeding through the screen. "I didn't mean it like that. You misunderstood. Let me explain." He still didn't understand that explanations weren't the missing piece. Respect was. Then came a third message. Longer this time, hurried, scattered. I was stressed. I said stupid things. Clara, too. We were frustrated. It wasn't serious. It was just venting. "Please talk to me." Venting. The word curled in my stomach like something sour. Venting is complaining about the weather, not deciding where to place your mother once you've squeezed the last signature out of her. I put the phone face down and stared at the ceiling. The lines of age in the plaster looked softer in the lamplight. I remembered Victor patching a crack up there once, muttering to himself about how the world would stay together if people put in just a bit of effort. People, it seemed, weren't as easy to repair. Another buzz, then another. He was unraveling now, his messages arriving closer together, the way a child might tug a sleeve harder each time he's ignored. I skimmed one more. "Mom, you're overreacting. We didn't mean anything by it. Let's just meet and talk like adults." I let out a quiet breath. It wasn't a laugh, but something close. "Talk like adults," he said, after speaking about me like a burden to unload. Some people never see the contradiction in their own words. For a moment, I wondered if I should call him back. Not to comfort him, not to open the door he kept pushing against, but to give him clarity, the kind that doesn't waver. Yet something gently anchored me. I wasn't ready, and he wasn't listening. He was pleading with a version of me that no longer existed. Eventually, the phone stopped buzzing. Maybe he was regrouping. Maybe he was angry. Maybe he was simply tired. I closed my eyes, letting the stillness return. The quiet wasn't lonely. It was honest. I rose and walked to the bookshelf where Victor's old radio sat, the one he used to repair every winter when the wires loosened. I turned it on, letting soft classical music float into the room. The melody slipped around me, gentle but steady. giving my nerves something to rest on. The music always reminded me of myself. Quiet but persistent, carrying more strength than people assumed. I sat again and folded my hands. My heart didn't race. It didn't ache. I felt something firmer, something older, settling into place. The understanding that no matter how Daniel tried to frame things, the truth had already happened. He had shown me who he was, and I had finally believed him. The night deepened around the house, but I didn't feel small in it. I felt rooted, like a tree that had survived too many storms to fear the next gust of wind. For the first time in a long while, I knew exactly where I stood, and exactly where he no longer did. The next morning came with a pale, washed-out light, the kind that slips quietly into a room without asking permission. I had slept better than I expected. Not deeply, not peacefully, but enough to let my mind settle. I moved through the house slowly, opening curtains, warming the air with little familiar gestures. The floorboards creaked under my feet in the same soft way they always had. Nothing in the house had changed, only me. I was making oatmeal when the phone rang again. Not frantic now, not rapid, just one long call, steady and patient. Daniel. I let it ring until the last moment, then answered. Not out of obligation, out of readiness. His voice came through, rough from a night without rest. Mom, can we talk, please? Yes, I said. We can. He exhaled shakily, as if those few words were a rope thrown to someone already knee-deep in water. I'm coming over. No, I said softly but firmly. Not this time. Say what you need to say from there. A pause. Then another. I could almost feel him searching for a place to land. Mom, I messed up, he finally said. I know I did. Last night was awful. I shouldn't have said those things. I wasn't thinking. You were thinking clearly, I replied, just not kindly. He swallowed, audibly. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I stirred my oatmeal slowly, the spoon moving in small, deliberate circles. I understood exactly what it meant. There was a long silence. Then, quieter. I don't want to lose you. I closed my eyes for a moment. You weren't afraid of losing me. You were afraid of losing what you expected to take from me. That's not fair, he snapped. But the snap lacked teeth, more worn out than angry. It's honest, I said. He breathed in sharply. So you're punishing me? No, I'm acknowledging the truth. I paused. Something I should have done years ago. Another stretch of silence settled between us, heavy, but necessary. Then his voice shifted, wobbling with something like shame. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, I said. Some things aren't errors, they're revelations. I heard him draw breath, then let it go slowly, like a man realizing the ground beneath him isn't what he thought. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, thinner. I didn't think you understood Spanish. I know, I replied. That's why you spoke freely. He whispered something I couldn't catch, maybe a curse at himself, maybe a plea no one could grant. I continued, my tone calm, not cruel. You planned my future without me. You spoke about my home as if it were already yours. You discussed where to place me as if I were a package that needed storing. I paused. That wasn't a mistake, Daniel. That was who you've become. His breath hitched. I was stupid. Please understand. I understand perfectly, I said, and understanding changes things. The line went quiet, the way a room feels when the last person has run out of excuses. Finally, he whispered, Is there anything I can do? Yes, I said gently. You can let me make my own decisions. You can stop planning my life. and you can accept that I've taken back what's mine." He didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice shook. "So that's it? For now." He sniffed, a small, raw sound I hadn't heard from him since he was a child. "I'm sorry, Mom." I let the apology hang there. I didn't reject it, but I didn't cradle it either. A mother's forgiveness shouldn't be a bandage for a wound that hasn't stopped bleeding. After a long pause, I said, "Take care of yourself, Daniel." He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came, only a quiet, broken exhale. Then the line clicked off. I stood in the kitchen, phone still in my hand, oatmeal cooling on the stove. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a tired, gentle clarity. It is a strange thing to mourn someone who is still alive. Stranger still when that someone is your own child. But mourning doesn't mean ending. It means accepting what is and protecting what remains. I set the phone down, poured my oatmeal into a bowl, and sat at the table. The morning light had grown brighter now, softening the room. I wasn't alone. I was simply free. The afternoon settled slowly over the house, warm and soft, like a shawl drawn around my shoulders. I opened the back door and stepped into the garden, the air carrying that faint scent of damp soil and rosemary. The world felt calmer today, lighter even. Not because anything had been fixed, but because I had finally stopped fighting myself. I walked along the small stone path Victor laid down years ago, each step steady, each breath unhurried. Birds called from the hedges, their voices bright and sharp, unconcerned with human disappointments. I reached my favorite wooden chair under the old maple tree and sat, letting the sun warm my face. It felt good, simple, honest, undeserved by no one. I brought out the small radio I keep in the drawer by the back door. Victor bought it for me on our 20th anniversary. He had laughed and said, "You love stories in every language. You'll find more if you look." I didn't know then how true that would become. I turned the dial until a familiar Spanish station filled the air with soft voices and gentle guitar notes. The language washed over me comfortably, a quiet reminder that secrets can become strengths when carried patiently. For a long moment, I simply listened. The voices on the radio rose and fell, warm and melodic, wrapping around me like a calm I had earned. I wasn't thinking about Daniel, not about the things he said or the apologies he fumbled through. I wasn't thinking about Clara or houses or signatures or plans made behind my back. I was thinking about myself, my hands in the sun, my breath steady, my future mine again. The garden rustled with a soft wind, leaves shivering lightly as if whispering something kind. I closed my eyes, letting the world blur into color and sound. For the first time in many years, I felt no weight on my chest, no tightness, just a quiet strength that belonged to me alone. Later, I went inside and sat at the small writing desk in the living room. I took out a blank sheet of paper and wrote a short letter to Emily. Not about what happened, not the details, not the ugliness. Just the truth she deserved, that she is loved, that she has always been a light in my life, and that some things in this world must be protected carefully. I signed it, folded it, and tucked it into the drawer she always opens when she visits, the one where I keep the chocolate she thinks I don't notice her stealing. When I was done, I sat back and looked around the room. My home, my choices, my life. I felt no bitterness, only a quiet certainty that dignity is something you can reclaim at any age, even when the world tries to take it from you piece by piece. I turned off the lamp, letting the softer evening light fill the room. Outside, the maple leaves glowed gold at their edges. The radio continued playing in the background, A woman's warm voice speaking slow Spanish I understood without effort. I smiled to myself, a small, private smile. I had lost nothing that mattered. I had simply remembered who I was. And if my years have taught me anything, it's this. A woman is never too old to choose herself. If you felt something in this story, if it echoed a corner of your own life, I'd be grateful if you'd stay or leave a few words. Stories live longer when someone whispers back to them.